Yeah. Hi, everybody. I have to present our office in the time span of 10 minutes. And in order to achieve that goal, I have assembled what is probably the most corporate presentation ever given. But anyway, so we are an office. This is the abbreviation of Office for Metropolitan Architecture, a name, as you can tell, clearly invented in the 70s. Meanwhile, we have grown a lot. We have 5 offices. Are sort of represented in almost in every continent, with the exception of Australia. We have about 80 projects concurrently running in 35 countries. But I guess all of this is extremely uninteresting. But what is interesting is that actually our global reach and the fact that we work all over the world is actually reflected in the demographic composition of our staff. We are an office that is in the Netherlands, mainly, but we are not a Dutch office. In the context of our office, the Dutch are a minority. The spoken language is English, and it's largely an expat situation on the ground in the Netherlands. And that is very, very essential, because that is essentially the root of the creative formula of our office, which I guess is a kind of nuclear fusion reaction, which actually emerges from a carefully engineered permanent cultural clash. Which is what we try to represent in this diagram. And in actual reality, it looks something like this. A lot of deliberation, a lot of options, a lot of doubt, and occasionally an end result. But since the process is like this, we have expanded our operation also beyond buildings. That we have established a parallel organization, AMO. That doesn't mean anything. Which is dedicated to, in a way, cast the thinking that we used to do for buildings in different kinds of products, of which this is one. We had a relationship with Nobel actually long before we knew it. This is a Dutch newspaper. It says EU gets the Nobel Peace Prize. The image you see above there is a flag. It's actually a flag we designed for the European Union. I don't think the European Union ever really asked for it. But we did it in 2001. It's a flag that is essentially a composition of all flags of the members, which is then progressively assembled, going from Ireland to Greece here. In a kind of barcode, going from east to west in this kind of symbol. This was a thinking exercise we did for the EU, and apparently retrospectively, this flag was on the cover of every single Dutch newspaper, which we claimed as a kind of that we could retroactively take credit for the fact that the EU even got this prize. Anyway. This is what we did, and 4 years after that, Austria, of all countries, adopted our flag as their presidential logo, with the kind of Austrian bit sort of made slightly more noticeable than the rest. But the interesting thing was, none of these images is Photoshop. All of these images are actually real photographs of how our flag, our barcode flag, actually infiltrated the political domain, to the point that on a state visit, George Bush actually, without ever knowing it, indicated that Europe should be bigger. The story goes on. It became the basis of an exhibition. It became the basis of an exhibition in Europe, in the heart of European sad bureaucratic architecture. And the interesting thing here is that this is actually a bit of architecture, a bit of temporary architecture, but it is a space designed for an event, largely for an opening. It's an exhibition designed for an opening on a kind of anniversary of Europe. And in the context of what our task at hand is here, we are making a building, but we are in fact giving retroactively a home to an event, it is maybe not an uninteresting example. This is an Iranian demonstration outside on the day of the opening. Actually, a more interesting event on the outside than took place on the inside. Anyway, this is another kind of temporary structure. It is called the Transformer. It is also a building for exhibitions in Seoul. The thing is, this is a tetrahedron that has 4 different sides. And the essence of this building is that every now and then you can turn it on its side, you can turn it on its side, you can turn it again on its side, so that a facade becomes a plan, becomes a facade. So that every time when you do that, and the spectacle is actually in changing, every time when you do that, it has another program. This is an exhibition of Prada skirts, but this is, for instance, in another configuration with another plan, it becomes a cinema. And given the multiple aims that also this building has to serve, maybe also a relevant example. Well, we also do serious work. This is the largest building we have designed to date. It is the headquarters for China Central Television. And the point of this building was that it was meant to make essentially something very secluded, public, the operating of the Chinese state television. A building which is meant to allow the public inside that building in a public route that that follows the loop form of the building and goes through the entire building, so that what you see here actually is this, and where there is the red, actually the public can enter to the top of the building in the most intimate part. Here you see part of that public trajectory, and here that's through that glass, actually looking down through the cantilever all the way to the ground. This building was a competition. It was won in 2002, and at that particular moment, the reconstruction of the World Trade Center towers in New York was on the cards, very relevant. And I remember we had 2 simultaneous invitations. We chose for the Chinese invitation for very evident reasons, because we suspected the World Trade Center thing would become a bit of a talk show. Which I guess it did. But of course this meant also, by doing that building, a very aggressive confrontation with a system that isn't ours, with a certain type of politics that aren't ours, but that meanwhile have so much momentum, are so important in the world, that it's a type of engagement that one is almost by the forced to deal with and find a way out. But we have, in doing that building, probably very many made similar experience as occasionally the Nobel Committee also has when it has to deal with China. Another building, a concert hall in Porto. This was finished in 2005. It's actually a concealed shoebox where the concert halls are sort of taken out of a mass that looks like a meteorite. This is the main hall for concerts. The end of the concert hall is a kind of big window onto the city, so that it's occasionally also a machine that allows one to view the city as the backdrop of concerts. All foyers are linked by a kind of public trajectory that, like in the case of the CCTV building, morph through the whole building. All the way to the top, with different functions, all the way to the top. And occasionally on the outside, performances are held as well, where the building then becomes a kind of recessive foreground. Then the last project. This is a public library in Seattle. It's a library, but it's also a machine for public space, in the sense that the storage of books and other things is a series of floating boxes, and that it's really about the space in between those boxes that are a series of elevated public plazas in the heart of an American city, in this case Seattle. So this is how the public actually invades these public levels. I have 27 seconds. Essentially, that building is in a way a very iconic building for Seattle, and has actually also helped contribute to visitors numbers from Seattle. And it's the only case where actually our building had a very indicatable economic effect on something. And since generally architects are considered a waste of money in the current world, this was an occasional proof of the opposite. Thank you.